Christina Marie Riggs was born in 1971 in Lawton, Oklahoma. Her childhood was hard. She later said that both a stepbrother and a neighbor had touched and harmed her in ways no child should endure. By her early teens, she was using illegal substances and drinking heavily. At 16, she became pregnant and later placed the baby for adoption. Still, she pushed through. She finished high school and became a licensed practical nurse. She went on to have 2 children of her own, Justin in 1992 and Shelby in 1994. She married John Riggs, but the relationship didn't last. After an incident where John physically harmed Justin, the marriage ended. After the divorce, Christina was left struggling. Finances were tight. Her support system was gone. She felt completely alone. Then came November 4th, 1997. That night, something broke inside her. Christina gave herself and her children high doses of a powerful sedative called Elavil. Then she tried to inject Justin with potassium chloride, the same chemical used in executions. He woke up in pain. She panicked. And then she smothered him. She did the same to Shelby. Afterward, Christina attempted to end her own life. She swallowed pills. She injected herself with potassium chloride. But she survived. Christina left notes. She said she did not want her children to suffer because of her or end up in foster care. She believed that ending their lives was a way to protect them. Prosecutors said she was overwhelmed by being a single parent and by money troubles. She was arrested on November 6, 1997. At first, she pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. She later dropped that and asked for the harshest sentence. In her trial in June 1998, she said, "I want to die. I want to be with my babies." The jury found her responsible and gave her the maximum penalty. On May 2, 2000, at the Cummins unit in Arkansas, she was given an injection that stopped her heart. Her last words were, "There is no way no words can express how sorry I am for taking the lives of my babies. Now I can be with my babies, as I always intended." She also whispered, "I love you, my babies." But what makes a mother turn poison into profit? Judy Anna Lou Welty was born in 1943 in Quanah, Texas. Her mother passed away when she was 4. Judy and her younger brother then went to live with their grandparents. A few years later, they moved to Roswell, New Mexico, to live with their father and his new wife. Reports say Judy was mistreated by her father and stepmother. She was often kept from food and made to do hard work. When she was 14, she spent 2 months in a juvenile facility after she sprayed hot grease on family members. In 1962, Judy married James Goodyear. He served as a U.S. Air Force sergeant in Vietnam. 3 months after he came home in 1971, he became ill and passed away. At first, doctors said he passed of natural causes. In 1984, James's body was dug up, and tests showed he had arsenic in his system. Judy had already collected life insurance money after his passing. By 1972, Judy was living with Bobby Joe Morris in Colorado. In 1978, Morris grew sick in the same way and passed away too. An autopsy later found arsenic in his body. Judy again received life insurance. Money. In 1980, Judy's son Michael showed signs of arsenic poisoning. He could no longer move part of his body. Not long after, he drowned while canoeing with Judy. She had taken out a new life insurance policy on him just before the trip. In 1983, Judy's boyfriend John Gentry survived an explosion that destroyed his car. Investigators learned Judy had been giving him pills she said were vitamins. Those pills had arsenic and another poison in them. She also told people John had a serious illness, but he didn't. After the car blast, officials looked into Judy's past. They dug up the bodies of James, Bobby Joe, and Michael. Tests confirmed all 3 had arsenic poisoning. Her careful planning made it hard to spot what was really going on. This case highlights why investigators must look closely when someone dies under strange circumstances. But in 1983, Judy was arrested on several charges, including taking a life and trying to take a life. In 1984, a court found Judy guilty. The court gave her capital punishment. On March 30th, 1998, Florida carried out that sentence in the electric chair. She was the first woman executed in Florida since 1848. She was also the first woman in the U.S. to face the electric chair since 1976. For her last meal, Judy had steamed broccoli, asparagus, strawberries, tomato wedges, and hot tea with lemon. When asked if she had any final words, she said, "No, sir." But the next story? The brutality shocked even seasoned investigators. Lois Nadian Smith, nicknamed Mean Nadian, had a tough reputation since high school. On the night of July 4th, 1982, Smith and her son Greg drove to a motel in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. There they picked up Greg's ex-girlfriend, 21-year-old Cindy Bailey. The reason? Confrontation. Smith believed Cindy had been spreading rumors, and worse, that she was planning to have Greg harmed. Cindy denied it. But the argument spiraled quickly. Smith grabbed Cindy by the throat and began choking her. Then, in a flash of rage, she pulled out a sharp object and slashed her throat. But it didn't end there. They forced Cindy into the car and drove her nearly 30 miles to the small town of Gans. Inside a house there, Smith pulled out a gun. She shot Cindy 9 times, in the chest, the head, and the back. Greg stood nearby and reloaded the weapon for her. The brutality shocked even seasoned investigators. Both Smith and her son were arrested and charged. Greg was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Smith received capital punishment. Her lawyers said she was under the influence of illegal substances and believed she was protecting her son. The prosecution said it was planned and cruel. In November 2001, the Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board denied her request for mercy. On December 4th, 2001, Smith's sentence was carried out by injection at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester. She was declared gone at 9:13 p.m. Before that, she spoke to Cindy's family. She said she was sorry for the pain she caused and asked for their forgiveness. She repeated, "Thank you, Jesus," as the procedure began. For her final meal, Smith chose barbecued ribs, onion rings, strawberry banana cake, and a cherry limeade. Greg remains in prison for his role in the homicide. Cindy's daughter, Brandy Fields, said she felt relief afterward, believing justice had been served. Frances Elaine Newton was born in 1965 in Harris County, Texas. She was a young mother of 2. Her husband was Adrian Newton. Their son, Alton, was 7 years old. Their daughter, Farah, was 21 months old. In 1985, Frances was found guilty of forging a signature. She received 3 years of probation. This past offense was later brought up during her capital homicide trial. On April 7, 1987, something terrible happened in their Houston apartment. Adrian, Alton, and Farah were found after being shot with a .25 caliber pistol. Frances said she came home, saw them, and called the police right away. But investigators began to suspect her story. They discovered that Frances had taken out life insurance policies on her husband and children. The total value was $100,000. She admitted she had signed Adrian's name without his permission. She said she did this so he would not know she was saving money for the insurance premiums. Prosecutors said she did this for financial gain. Investigators also found the .25 caliber pistol hidden in a relative's house soon after the shootings. Ballistics tests showed it was the same gun used in all 3 cases. Experts also found gunpowder residue on a skirt Frances wore that day. This tied her to the homicides. Frances was arrested and charged in October 1988. The prosecution showed evidence of the insurance papers, the pistol, and the residue on her skirt. Her lawyer argued she was not involved and suggested a dealer might have been responsible. But the jury did not agree. On November 17, 1988, she received the state's ultimate penalty. Frances never admitted involvement. She stayed on the section for people awaiting the state's ultimate penalty. Her appeals pointed out problems in her trial. Her attorney, Ron Mock, later said he was too overwhelmed at the time. He also admitted he did not interview any witnesses. Experts questioned whether the skirt test was reliable. They said common household items like fertilizer might leave similar residue. Some said there were other guns at the scene. so it was unclear if the hidden pistol was the one used. In December 2004, hours before her scheduled penalty was to be carried out, Governor Rick Perry granted a 120-day delay. The extra testing confirmed the pistol was used in the shootings. The skirt results remained unclear because the sample was contaminated. On September 14, 2005, the state carried out her sentence at the Huntsville unit in Texas. She was the first black woman to face this penalty in Texas since the Civil War. She had no final statement and didn't ask for a special last meal. Her family and her husband's relatives watched. Outside the prison, about 75 people gathered. They held signs and sang hymns. Francis Newton's case still sparks debate. The prosecution showed a clear financial motive and linked physical evidence to her. But questions about her legal help and the tests used leave some people wondering if her trial was fair. She maintained her innocence until the end, and that continues to fuel discussions about whether the most severe punishments can sometimes target the wrong person. Now meet Lisa, whose own history of neglect ended in the starvation of a 9-year-old in her care. Lisa Ann Coleman was born in 1975 in Tarrant County, Texas. Her early life was full of trauma and neglect. She spent most of her childhood in foster care. Before Lisa was born, her mother, just 13 at the time, had been forced into intimate acts by a family member. That same mother rarely visited Lisa while she was in the system. Lisa grew up without steady support and felt abandoned. By July 2004, Lisa was living in an apartment in Arlington with her partner, Marcella Williams. Marcella had a 9-year-old son named Devontae Marcel Williams. Devontae had been living in dangerous conditions for a long time. There were clear signs of ongoing neglect. On July 26th, paramedics were called to the home. When they arrived, they found Devontae severely underweight. He weighed just 36 pounds, about half the normal weight for his age. Doctors found over 250 injuries on his body. Some were burns from cigarettes or cigars. Others were scars that looked like they came from ropes or restraints. Many injuries showed he had been held down multiple times. The medical examiner said he passed because of starvation. Pneumonia had also played a role. By then, there was nothing anyone could do. Both Lisa and Marcella were charged with taking Devontae's life. Marcella chose to accept a deal. She was given a life sentence. Lisa went to trial in 2006. She faced the harshest possible penalty. Her lawyers said her actions grew out of her own traumatic past and struggles with bipolar disorder. They argued she couldn't fully grasp how serious her choices were. At trial, the state showed the full extent of Devontae's injuries. Prosecutors said Lisa had acted on purpose and with cruelty. They connected her choices directly to his passing. The defense described her broken childhood and mental health struggles. In the end, the jury still found her fully responsible. Lisa spent nearly 10 years awaiting that final sentence. On September 17, 2014, she faced her FINA, punishment. She was the 6th woman in Texas to face this penalty since 1982. Before that day, she spoke to her loved ones. She told her family and friends she loved them. She asked them to stay strong. She sent special messages to fellow inmates and to Richie, Brad, and John, and Auntie, ending with, "I'm done. I love you all." Texas no longer allows special last meals. Instead, inmates get whatever the rest of the unit receives. On the morning the sentence was carried out, Lisa's meal was a fried pork chop, macaroni and cheese, carrots, green beans, navy beans, sliced bread, and pineapple orange cake. She could choose tea, punch, or water to drink. But the next mother would risk it all for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Marilyn K Plants was born in 1960. She lived in Midwest City, Oklahoma. Her spouse was James Earl Plants. They had 2 children, Trina and Chris. James, who was 33, worked nights as a pressman at the Daily Oklahoman. From the outside, their life looked calm and happy. In spring 1987, Marilyn began seeing 18-year-old William Clifford Bryson. Their secret relationship lasted a year. During that time, they made plans that led to a fatal event. A $300,000 life insurance policy on James played a big part in their plan. On August 26, 1988, James came home around 4 a.m. He had groceries in his hands. As he stepped inside, Bryson and his friend, 19-year-old Clinton Eugene McKimball, waited for him. They used the children's baseball bats to strike James. Marilyn stayed in another room and did not join them. Even after the beating, James was still alive. Bryson and McKimball put him in James's pickup truck. They drove to a quiet spot outside town. There, they tried to make the event look like an accident by setting the truck on fire. The fire didn't catch at first. Bryson poured gasoline on James and started the flames again. McKimball later said he saw James move as they left. That meant James was still alive when the fire burned. Back at home, Marilyn worked to hide the red spatters. She cleaned what she could and then covered the floor with a rug. She later said she did not know about the insurance policy, but the evidence showed she did know. 3 days later, police arrested Marilyn, Bryson, and McKimball. McKimball agreed to tell everything in return for a life term. His story explained how they planned and carried out the event. In March 1989, Marilyn and Bryson went on trial together. Prosecutors showed that the plan was formed ahead of time. They pointed to Marilyn's role in supplying the bats and ordering the burning. The jury found 2 reasons to add extra punishment. They did it for money, and it was very cruel. Both Marilyn and Bryson were found guilty of the top-level charge of causing James's passing. They received capital punishment. McKimball was given life in prison because he cooperated. Marilyn appealed her case for over 10 years. In 2001, people questioned the work of forensic chemist Joyce Gilchrist. An FBI review raised doubts about her methods in many cases. Still, Governor Frank Keating said there was enough proof in Marilyn's case. He pointed to her statements and McKimball's testimony as solid evidence. On May 1, 2001, Marilyn faced her punishment by receiving an injection at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester. She was the second woman in Oklahoma to face that outcome. Before it happened, Marilyn spoke to her family and the witnesses. She told them she loved them very much, especially Trina and Chris. She spoke about faith and hope. She said nothing could separate them from love. For her final meal, she chose a chicken taco salad, a Mexican pizza, 2 enchiritos, 2 chicken soft tacos, cinnamon twists, a slice of pecan pie, and 2 cans of soda. Trina, her daughter, had opposed the punishment, but had made up with her mother before it took place. Chris, her son, also visited. This case shows how private choices and money can end in a tragic loss. Could things have gone differently if Marilyn had not used her children's bats? That choice tied her more closely to the event. It also left extra pain for the children, who lost both parents. Did questions about the chemist's work affect her case? Some people worried about Gilchrist's methods, but officials said the other proof, Marilyn's own words and McKimball's account, was strong enough on its own. They called the next mother the Black Widow of Alabama, but even she didn't know why she did it, or so she claimed. Rhonda Tomley was born in 1907 in Alabama. Her parents were James Robert Tomley and Mary Frances Grimes. Before her arrest, she worked as a waitress in Montgomery. She had been married 5 times. She had 7 children. In March 1956, Rhonda made a stunning confession. She admitted to poisoning her mother, 2 husbands, and 3 of her children. But she denied having anything to do with what happened to the other 2 children. A Life magazine report from the time claimed she liked the attention. She enjoyed receiving sympathy cards when loved ones got sick and later passed away. She even had them buried side by side in a private family plot. Her 5th husband was Ronald Martin. Earlier in life, he had been her stepson. After eating poisoned food, he fell seriously ill. He survived, but was left unable to move his legs. That illness raised red flags. Investigators began looking into the long trail of sickness and loss surrounding the Martin family. Prosecutors believed Rhonda did it for insurance payouts, but the money was small, just enough to pay for graves. She never admitted a motive. In March 1956, officers took her into custody. She was found guilty for taking the life of her husband, 51-year-old Claude Carroll Martin, in 1951 by putting rat poison into his food. She was only convicted in one case, but claimed responsibility for the others, except the 2 children, whose outcomes she said she had nothing to do with. Because Rhonda had a weak heart, prison officials often waited until the very last moment to tell her when her sentence would be carried out. The day before it was set to happen for the first time, she had a 2-hour hearing. Her lawyer argued that she had never had a full mental health review. The judge decided to go ahead anyway. She stayed in Jefferson County Jail until May 1957. Then she moved to Kilby Prison, where Alabama's electric chair was kept. When that date was pushed back, she went to Julia Tutwiler Prison for Women. 8 days before her sentence was carried out, she gave an interview. She said, "Well, you've never seen anyone ready to sit down in the electric chair. But if that's what it has to be, that's what it will be." For her last meal, she chose a hamburger, mashed potatoes, cinnamon rolls, and coffee. In the early hours of October 11, 1957, she was strapped into the chair. The first attempt failed because the electrodes weren't plugged in. A few minutes later, they tried again. She received 2,200 volts of electricity. At 12:16 a.m., officials announced she had passed away. They removed her from the chamber at 12:25 a.m. She did not speak any final words, but prison staff later found a note she wrote on October 14, 1956. In it, she asked for her body to go to a medical school. She wanted experts to study her brain and body. She wrote that she could not explain why she did what she did and hoped someone could learn from her case to help others avoid the same tragedy. But the next story? This one is beyond comprehension. Lisa Montgomery was born in 1968 in Kansas. When she was a child, her mother hit her often. Her stepfather forced her into unwanted acts many times. As she grew up, her mind suffered. Doctors said she had bipolar disorder. They also said she had some brain damage. On December 16, 2004, Montgomery drove from her home in Melbourne, Kansas, to Skidmore, Missouri. She said she wanted to buy a puppy from Bobby Joe Stinnett. Stinnett was 23 and expecting a baby. When Montgomery arrived, she wrapped a rope around Stinnett's neck until Stinnett lost consciousness. Then Montgomery used a sharp kitchen object to cut open Stinnett's belly. She took out the unborn child. Stinnett woke up and tried to fight back. Montgomery did not stop. Stinnett later passed from her injuries. Montgomery left with the newborn, Victoria Joe. She tried to pass the baby off as her own. She even called her husband in Topeka and said she had given birth that day at a birthing center. The next day, police found Montgomery at her home with Victoria Joe. They took Montgomery into custody. DNA tests showed the baby was Stinnett's. Victoria Joe went back to her family. Montgomery faced federal charges connected to forcibly taking Stinnett, which ultimately led to her loss of life. In 2007, her trial focused on whether she planned every step. Prosecutors showed that Montgomery had looked up how to perform a cesarean cut online. She also brought tools for that purpose. Her lawyers said her years of mistreatment and mental health problems had warped her judgment. The jury, however, ruled that she was fully responsible. They gave her the harshest sentence under federal law. Over the next years, her legal team tried again and again to overturn that sentence. They said she was too unwell to face such a penalty. Courts reviewed her appeals but left the sentence in place. On January 13, 2021, the government carried out Montgomery's federal sentence at the correctional complex in Terre Haute, Indiana. She was the first woman in the federal system to face this penalty since 1953. Before the sentence was carried out, a woman beside Montgomery removed her face mask and asked for any final words. Montgomery only said, "No," and then remained silent. Coming as a duo who tricked a school into handing over a little boy. Bonnie Emily Brown Hedi was born in 1912. She grew up on a farm in St. Joseph, Missouri. Her father was a successful farmer. But as Bonnie got older, she drifted far from her quiet beginnings. She gained a reputation for wild parties and a reckless lifestyle. And in July 1953, she met Carl Austin Hall, a meeting that would trigger one of the most tragic crimes in American history. On September 28, 1953, Hedi and Hall walked into Notre Dame de Sion, a private school in Kansas City, Missouri. Inside, 6-year-old Bobby Greenlease was sitting in class. Hedi wore simple clothes, calm, convincing. She told staff she was Bobby's aunt, said his mother had just suffered a heart attack. The school believed her. They let Bobby walk out the door with a woman who wasn't family. He never made it home. Hedi and Hall drove him across state lines to Johnson County, Kansas. There, Hall pulled out a .38 caliber revolver and fired. They buried Bobby's body in Hedi's backyard in St. Joseph. The same day, they made a call to Bobby's father, Robert Greenlease Sr., a wealthy car dealer. The demand? $600,000 for Bobby's safe return. No questions asked. He paid. In full. At the time, it was the largest ransom ever paid in U.S. history. With the money, Hedi and Hall went on a spree. Fine restaurants, designer clothes, expensive hotels. They flaunted their sudden wealth in plain sight. But it didn't last long. Their spending raised suspicions. Just days later, on October 6, 1953, police arrested them in St. Louis. At first, Hedi claimed she knew nothing. She said she hadn't been involved. But under pressure, she admitted the truth. She helped plan it. And she tried to protect Hall afterward. On November 19, 1953, both Hall and Hedi pleaded guilty in federal court. The judge called it the worst case he had ever seen. 81 days after the abduction, on December 18, 1953, both Hedi and Hall lost their lives side by side in the gas chamber at the Missouri State Penitentiary. Their last meal was fried chicken. Elizabeth Ann Duncan was born Hazel Lucille Sinclair Anai in 1904 in Kansas City, Missouri. She used many names and gave different birth dates. Sometimes she claimed to be more than 10 years younger than she really was. In court, she said she'd been married 10 times and had 4 children. She spoke warmly of her son Frank. Her daughter Patricia passed at age 15. Elizabeth had also been arrested for running a brothel in San Francisco and for writing bad checks. Elizabeth and her son Frank were very close. Frank grew up to be a lawyer and lived with his mother into adulthood. When he told her he planned to move out, she tried to take her own life by overdosing on sleeping pills. While recovering at Cottage Hospital in Santa Barbara, she was cared for by nurse Olga Kupchik. Frank and Olga soon fell in love and married on June 20, 1958, after learning Olga was expecting their child. Elizabeth reacted with fierce jealousy. She followed Olga to work, made her change her address several times, and even plotted to persuade Frank to break off the marriage. In court, she said, "I didn't want to lose Frankie. I couldn't stand life alone." In November 1958, Olga vanished. Suspicion fell on Elizabeth when police discovered she had arranged a fake annulment of Frank and Olga's marriage. She'd paid a man to pose as Frank while she pretended to be Olga. Investigators later found Olga's body in a shallow grave near Casitas Pass in Carpinteria. She had been struck with the butt of a pistol, suffocated, and buried alive. Elizabeth had hired Augustine Baldonado and Luis Moya, offering each of them $6,000 to take Olga's life. She ended up paying only a fraction of that sum. The trial grabbed headlines across the country. Baldonado and Moya testified against Elizabeth, laying out how they carried out her plan. Elizabeth's defense tried to cast Olga as dishonest, but witnesses described her as a caring, modest nurse who went into her field to help others. The jury convicted Elizabeth of first-degree homicide and imposed the harshest sentence. Baldonado and Moya also received the same penalty. On August 8, 1962, the state carried out Elizabeth's sentence in the gas chamber at San Quentin State Prison. She was the last woman in California to face this fate before the Supreme Court put a pause on such punishments nationwide. Baldonado and Moya also had their sentences carried out that day, marking the final time 3 people faced this penalty together in the state. This story shows how intense jealousy can lead someone to cross every line. Elizabeth's refusal to accept her son's new life drove her to plotting, deception, and aggressiveness. The loss of Olga Duncan reminds us why respect and clear boundaries are so important in family relationships. The next mother called it mercy, but when the tea turned toxic and the funerals piled up, the truth finally surfaced. Born Margie Velma Bullard. In 1932, in Eastover, North Carolina, she was the second of 9 children. They lived on a tobacco farm with no electricity and no indoor plumbing. Her father often hurt her, and her mother did nothing to stop him. When she was 13, her father harmed her in a way no child should ever face. At 17, she married Thomas Burke. They had 2 children but struggled with money. Velma picked up every job she could find to keep the family afloat. A doctor gave her tranquilizers to calm her anxiety, and she grew dependent on them. Her husband started drinking heavily, which made things even harder at home. In 1969, Thomas Burke died in a fire at their house. Investigators thought he had dozed off while smoking. 2 years later, in 1971, she wed Jennings Barfield. He passed away that same year from heart trouble. In 1974, her mother fell very sick with stomach problems but recovered. In 1977, Velma went to work as a home care helper for an elderly couple named Montgomery and Dolly Edwards. Both fell suddenly ill and passed away within months. Their signs looked just like food poisoning. Next, she cared for John Henry Lee and his wife. In 1977, John Henry Lee also became sick in the same way and died. In early 1978, she began a relationship with Stuart Taylor, a widower. She worried he would find out she had been taking money from his bank account. To stop him from discovering the truth, she slipped rat poison into his beer and tea. Stuart Taylor passed on February 3, 1978. An autopsy showed arsenic in his body. After that, the bodies of her earlier clients were brought back to the surface. They, too, had arsenic in them. When confronted, Velma admitted she had poisoned them all. She said she was trying to hide the money she had taken. She needed cash to feed her addiction. She felt trapped by her need for tranquilizers and by fear of getting caught. On May 13, 1978, police took her into custody. She was accused of taking Stuart Taylor's life. At her court hearing, she claimed she had more than one personality. She said another side of her, which she called Billy, was responsible. The judge replied that it did not matter which part of her had done it. The jury found her guilty, and the judge gave her the most severe penalty allowed. While in her cell, Velma found comfort in faith. She shared her beliefs with other inmates and with prison staff. Several church leaders, including Billy and Ruth Graham, asked the governor to show her mercy. He refused. After using up every legal option, she chose not to file any more appeals. On November 2, 1984, at Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina, Velma was given an injection that ended her life. She was the first woman in the United States to face that ending by injection. At 2:15 a.m., she was declared lifeless, just 15 minutes after the dose. For her last meal, she asked only for cheese doodles and a bottle of Coca-Cola. Before it was over, she spoke softly. "I know that everyone has gone through a lot of pain, all the families connected, and I am sorry, and I want to thank everyone who has supported me these past 6 years.